Before we get to today's episode, let's talk about something so many writers I coach run into. You're in the middle of your first draft. You have more ideas and material than you know what to do with, and it's hard to get your arms around all of it. Maybe you're stalled, or you can't quite find the story inside the mess. Most of the time, there's a weak link in your story's foundation. I made a free resource called the Story Clarity Worksheet. This helps you find exactly where your story foundation is solid and where the gaps are, so you know exactly what's missing and what to do next. Go to nancypanuccio.com/clarity to download yours. nancypanuccio.com/clarity. Okay, on to today's episode. The obstacles aren't random. They're all hitting the same wound. That's what you're building toward, a transformation. By the end of your story, for better or for worse, your protagonist should believe something different than they believed at the beginning. The obstacles are the mechanism that makes the change happen. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has the story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. In working privately with first-time novelists and memoir writers over the years, I've come across the same common, persistent mistakes over and over. These are good writers. They have fascinating stories, and they have great storytelling instincts. They don't make these mistakes because they haven't worked hard. They absolutely have. Many of these stories have been years in the making. Writers make these common mistakes because, well, first drafts are hard, and most of us don't know what we don't know until someone points it out. So today I'm going to talk about 3 common mistakes that show up again and again in first, even second drafts, mistakes that quietly drain the momentum from a story without the writer realizing why or even that it's happening. And sometimes this causes writers to get overwhelmed and lost because of these common mistakes, especially mid-draft. I'm also going to tell you how to avoid these 3 mistakes and what to do instead. Just know that just about every writer venturing into their first novel or memoir makes these mistakes. These are good writers with powerful stories, so you're in good company. So let's get right to it. Mistake number 1, the main character's want is too vague. One of the first questions I ask when I'm coaching a writer through a first draft is, what does your main character want? The answers I get are almost always some version of, she wants to find herself. She wants to be happy. She wants to carve out her own identity. He wants to feel like he belongs. But those are not concrete desires the readers can track. Those are feelings, and you can't build a story just around a feeling. Now, there's nothing wrong with the feeling. I want that as a reader, but the feeling still needs to manifest in the world of the real, in something concrete and specific. The feeling may be something your character is ultimately after, but they may not be conscious of it yet. It's the emotional driver, but a story still needs something more specific the reader can track. Here's why it matters. Your protagonist's want is the engine of your plot. It's what gets your character to take risks, maybe get into danger, maybe make bad or difficult choices. It's what puts your character under pressure in each scene. It's what drives every choice your character makes, every risk your character takes, every scene in your book. If the want is vague, the plot is vague, and the story falls apart. Your draft wanders, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your protagonist doesn't have anywhere specific to go. A concrete want has two things. It has an external target, something visible and specific that the character is moving toward or fighting to hold on to, and it has an internal belief, what the character thinks getting that thing will mean for them, and they may not even be conscious of it. For example, in The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro, Stevens, an English butler, wants to take a road trip to visit a former colleague. That's it. That's the external want. Extremely modest. There's nothing inherently dramatic about it, but the internal belief layered underneath it is devastating. Stevens believes that professional dignity and loyalty to his employer were worth any personal sacrifice, including love. The entire novel is him slowly, painfully discovering that belief was wrong the whole time. The small external want is almost a pretense. What the story is actually about is a man reckoning with a life built on a false foundation. In the memoir Wild, Cheryl Strayed wants to hike the 1,100-mile Pacific Crest Trail. What's driving her is a desire to heal from grief and redeem herself after a self-destructive spiral. The external want doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be specific. And the internal belief has to be something that can be challenged. So the external want gives you the plot. The internal belief gives you character. You need both. Most writers know what the character's internal need is, what their internal belief is, but they haven't externalized it. So here's what to do. Finish this sentence about your protagonist. She wants blank because she believes it will give her blank. Now, if you can't finish it, or if your answers are still abstract, that's your first revision priority. Not the sentences, not the pacing, not rewriting the opening, just this. You just want to make sure that whatever the internal desire is, that it manifests in something in the world of the real, something that's concrete, something that's specific. She wants what because she believes it will give her what. Okay, on to mistake number 2. Obstacle stacking. This one is hard to see because it looks like good storytelling from the inside. Your protagonist wants something. Things keep getting in the way. She tries, she fails, something new goes wrong, she tries again. It's one calamity after another, and you've got conflict on every page, in every scene. The story keeps moving. The problem is that a pile of obstacles isn't the same thing as a story. If each new complication is essentially the same as the last one, another setback, another difficulty, another calamity, another thing going wrong, your draft starts to feel like a treadmill. There's lots of movement, but there's no forward progress. And readers feel that. They can't sense where the story is going. They're watching a character struggle without any feeling of what the struggle is building toward. Here's the distinction. Obstacles that stack just make things harder. Obstacles that build do something more specific. They force your protagonist to confront the internal belief we talked about in mistake number 1. Every significant obstacle should be doing the same underlying work, just from a different angle with higher stakes each time. I think about Revolutionary Road. Frank and April Wheeler face obstacle after obstacle. The Paris plan, the plan to move to Paris, falls through. April gets pregnant. Frank gets a promotion he didn't really want. Every single one of these complications is aimed at the same target, dismantling Frank's belief that he's exceptional, that he's different from everyone else in the suburbs, that his real life is just temporarily delayed. The obstacles aren't random. They're all hitting the same wound. That's what you're building toward, a transformation. By the end of your story, for better or for worse, your protagonist should believe something different than they believed at the beginning. The obstacles are the mechanism that makes the change happen. If your obstacles aren't connected to the belief, they're just weather. Here's a practical test. Take your 3 biggest plot complications and ask, what does each one cost your protagonist? Not just practically, but internally. Does it chip away at what your character believes about himself or the world? If you can't answer that, the obstacle may be doing plot work without doing character work, without doing story work. The fix isn't to cut complications. It's to make sure they're aimed at something, that they're building towards something. Okay, on to mistake number 3, event stacking. This one might be the most common of all, and it's the hardest to catch because individually, the scenes are often interesting. But when you step back and look at the draft as a whole, nothing feels connected. The character has coffee with a friend, gets in an argument with her sister, goes back to work, goes back home, has an argument with her husband, or receives unexpected news. So things happen, but there's no tissue between them. There's no sense that each scene is the consequence of the last, or that they're all pulling towards something. This is event stacking, and it's very common. It produces a very specific feeling in the reader. There's interest, but there's no investment. Because a series of unconnected events doesn't create momentum. It just creates more pages. So here's what's supposed to be connecting your scenes: causality and consequence. Each scene should grow out of the one before it and create the conditions for the one that follows. Not loosely, not even thematically necessarily, but causally. Your protagonist makes a choice in scene 3. That choice creates a consequence in scene 5. That consequence forces another choice in scene 7. So the story is a chain. It's not a collection of events. I think about Little Fires Everywhere. Elena Richardson makes a decision to rent the cottage to Mia. That decision brings Mia into her world, which brings Mia's daughter into her daughter's world, which triggers a chain of choices, secrets, and consequences that eventually burn Elena's house down, literally. Every major event in that novel is causally linked to what came before it. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything lands with weight because readers feel the chain underneath it. Now, the scenes in your draft might already be causally connected. You might just not be making that connection visible enough on the page. If you go through everything on the page and you can describe it as a series of and thens, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, well, you more than likely have event stacking. But if you can describe it like this happened, therefore this happened, but then this happened. Your scenes are connected by cause and consequence. So read through a section of your draft and try it. My character did this, and therefore she had to do that, but then this happened, which meant she had to choose between two almost impossible choices. So all three of these mistakes are all symptoms of the same problem. If your want is vague, your protagonist doesn't have a destination, if your obstacles aren't aimed at the internal belief, if they're not built to dismantle that belief, then they're not building toward a transformation. If your events aren't causally connected, the story has no chain. Now, all three mistakes are really one big mistake. The story doesn't know yet what it's doing or where it's going. That's what happens in a first draft, but not in yours. First drafts are how you discover what the story is. Many writers need to write their way into the work before they can see it. The draft exists so you can find all these elements. And once you find them, once you can name the concrete want, the belief underneath it, the transformation those obstacles are building toward, you can go back and make the whole thing feel like it was inevitable all along. That's what revision is for. And it starts with knowing what to look for. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.